Well, a very, very happy Tuesday, everybody. Hopefully you'll know that today is actually World Mental Health Day. It's a day to raise awareness and to really kind of be aware of the importance of mental health and how we all need to look after it, our own mental health, one another's mental health. The theme this year is mental health as a universal human right. And it's all about calling for change. Well, change, that word in particular, we're going to focus on. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce our very own Dave Lyon. Now, talking of change, it's something we've never done before. We're going to have a talk from one of our very own colleagues. Those of you who don't know Dave, he's actually our communications coordinator in financial services. And he's one of the absolute faces of M Brown. He's been here for over 20 years, really popular figure across Griffin House. Dave is actually a highly sensitive person. Now, if you're not really sure what that really means, we're about to find out. Dave's going to share his own experiences with us and we'll talk for about 20, 25 minutes. Then the rest of the session is very much going to be a live Q&A. We've done them in previous sessions, hopefully you'll be aware, but I'd just like to encourage you, to really feel like you can pop your questions in the chat. Mental health, such an important topic. And Dave is more than happy to answer questions to the best of his ability today as well. Pop them in the chat as we go along and at the end as well. Now, without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Dave. Just a reminder, everyone, if you could keep your mics off whilst Dave's delivering the talk, and then we'll do the Q&A at the end. Thank you very much.
My camera really blown up. Oh, hang on, that seems to go better.
You're looking good, Dave. Go for it.
Excellent. Can everyone hear me? Let me just share my slides. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, can you see the slides?
We can.
You can. Excellent. Yeah. So, hello everyone. I'm Dave Lyon and I am a highly sensitive person. I'd like to talk about what I mean by the term highly sensitive, my journey to discovering this and its relationship with my own mental health. I hope that by sharing my own experience, I might be able to help someone else who's struggling with their own sensitive nature. And if that fails, I hope it's at least interesting. So like Josh said, I'm going to talk for the next 20 to 25 minutes. I've got a couple of slides, literally 3 other than this, so it won't be death by PowerPoint. It's mostly going to be me talking about my own experience. And please do feel free to ask anything you like. Don't worry about how you frame it. It's a safe space and I'm not going to be offended if it's coming from the right place. So please just pop it in there and don't worry about the wording. Similarly, if you've got ideas, please speak up because I'm not a renowned psychologist specialising in this. So if you can add to the conversation, it would be really cool to hear from you. So that out of the way, let's get started. Okay then. What comes to mind when you hear the phrase highly sensitive person? Now, feel free to post this in the chat. There's no right or wrong answers, just words and phrases that come to mind. I do have the chat up on the phone because of that many screens going on. I'm going to offer up a few of my own. So, delicate, fragile, soft, maybe weak, thin-skinned, emotional, I like it. Needs to toughen up, treat with kid gloves, doesn't take criticism well, absolutely. In touch with the feelings, I like that one. So I'm being a bit provocative with my choice of words. I know mine have been quite negative, but these are words and phrases commonly associated with being sensitive. So I looked up sensitive in the dictionary. If there's any guesses as to what that said, I will show you in a moment. But again, feel free to jump in the chat and just what you think it might say. So here it is. The first definition is easily upset by the things people say or do, or causing people to be upset, embarrassed, or angry. The next one needs to be dealt with carefully. The examples in the yellow box are great as well, starting with don't be so sensitive. The last definition that you can see on screen is getting closer to the mark, but there's a lot more to it. So that last one is understanding what other people need and being helpful and kind to them. Feel free to disagree with me, by all means, but my view is more often than not, sensitive is seen as a bit of a negative description and a negative personality trait. You don't really get many people walking around going, oh man, I wish I was more sensitive. I don't believe it's ever been intentional, but these are the general messages that I've received for as long as I can remember. I've grown up with them, that I need to be more resilient and I need to learn to toughen up. The way that I experienced life was invalidated continually, and people would tell me, you don't feel like that. Don't be ridiculous. You're overreacting. Don't be so sensitive. But what if you can't stop? What if being a sensitive person is just who you are? I'm 43 now. As a highly sensitive male, it's felt like a battle with myself my entire life. I felt like I was broken. My emotions could completely overwhelm me. And it just felt like the world didn't accept me or understand me. So I was a kid growing up in the 80s. So I was shy, I was awkward, I was nervous, I was a daydreamer, bit of a fidget. The term highly sensitive person wasn't coined until the mid 1990s. So I can't talk for what it's like growing up today. Could be a world away from my experience. If you're a parent or if you're much younger than me, I'd be really interested to hear in the chat if the experiences are similar or if things have changed. But for me, as a kid, it was very much a case of men don't show emotions. Big boys don't cry. And men certainly aren't supposed to be sensitive. I mean, you get this message over and over as a child. For me, it led to internalizing all of my feelings, or at least trying to, which probably served me quite well up until my mid-20s, but then it all started to fall apart. The impact, however unintentional, was I grew up with very little emotional intelligence. And what I mean by emotional intelligence is not being able to understand and manage and use my own emotions. For the most part of my life, sensitivity has felt like a massive curse and a really ugly secret to hide. I was embarrassed about how I experienced life, tried to hide it. I constantly felt on edge in case my sensitive side reared its ugly head and someone found me out. I've also attended over 50 hours of therapy throughout the years in an attempt to fix myself, but I'm still sensitive. Each therapist has said to me, totally unprompted, you seem to be very sensitive. And the solution has always been to become less sensitive. This was always recommended that I get there by putting myself in uncomfortable environments until I started to feel comfortable, which I never did. Again, it's this notion, even from the therapy, was it sensitivity is something to be cured. What none of the therapists ever said to me, though, was being a highly sensitive person is actually a normal trait for many people. And they never offered any guidance on why I might experience life the way I do. That would have really helped me to sort of better understand myself. It was only after I gave up trying to fix myself several years of fumbling about in the dark that I discovered the world of highly sensitive people. And I'm really not kidding when I say my life and my experiences immediately began to make sense to me. And so I started looking into it more and more. I remember being in disbelief, to be honest, that other people experience the world like I do. Just like, for someone who's been told all their life that the way they're experiencing things isn't how they're experiencing it, to suddenly find this world of people that are similar to me was it was life-changing for me, to be honest, in terms of my own mental health. And it's one of the main reasons that I want to talk today about the world of highly sensitive people, because it's not a hidden secret, but it's something that most people aren't aware of, even sensitive people like myself. So hopefully that sets the scene of where I'm coming from. So let me give you a definition then of a highly sensitive person and give you some of the facts and some of the characteristics surrounding it. So the term itself was coined in the 1990s by the psychologist Dr. Elaine Aron and her husband Arthur Aron. Although there's been a concept of innate sensitivity as far back as the early 1900s with Carl Jung, possibly even further. Dr. Aron, who coined the term though, defines the highly sensitive person as someone with a sensitive nervous system, aware of subtleties in their surroundings, and more easily overwhelmed when in a highly stimulating environment. Now, a key quality compared to those without the traits is highly sensitive people process everything around them much more. So Dr. Aron uses an acronym to summarize the defining aspects of high sensitivity. Should I just flick over? So she uses the acronym DOES. The D stands for depth of processing. You look for profound insights. You're a deep thinker. Decision making costs you more because you need to process more information. Over stimulation. A highly sensitive person feels overly stimulated more easily because they pick up on every tiny thing going on around them. And the E is for emotional responsiveness and empathy. Highly sensitive people are more empathetic because they have a higher amount of mirror neurons in their brain. You feel the emotions and experiences of other people. And then we have the S, sensitive to subtleties and sensory stimuli. Sensory processing goes deep. Every type of sensory stimulation hits 10 times harder. Now, I don't know whether 10 times harder is fair because I can only talk about how I experience the world, but these are the words that Dr. Aron uses. So, and you notice small details and are attuned to what's happening around you. So there's some of the sort of the defining elements of it. Being highly sensitive is a normal trait. There are varying estimates between 15 to 30% of the world thought to fit into the sensitive category. But it's not a black and white thing, you know, it's not like you're sensitive, you're not sensitive. It's a whole spectrum. It is genetic. Scientists have discovered several genetic combinations amongst highly sensitive people and through brain scans. So when I say I was born sensitive, I really mean I was born sensitive. People telling me not to be sensitive is like telling someone with blue eyes not to have blue eyes. It's great that you recognise that, but there's not actually anything I can really do to sort of combat my genetics. Now, I can link you up with loads of research and sources to better understand the differences, but I'm not going to try and explain them. I'm not qualified to talk about neurotransmitters, mirror neurons, dopamine, 5-HTTLPR gene variant, and a lot of other words, I'll be honest, I can't even pronounce. I'm going to talk about my experience. There is also another term for the trait that you may be more familiar with, and that is sensory processing sensitivity. If you test as having high level of sensory processing sensitivity, you're a highly sensitive person. The sensitive population is roughly equally split, male and female. There's around 70% of highly sensitive people will be classed as introverts, but 30% are extroverts. So one of the stereotypes of shyness and quietness that might go along with being sensitive, it just isn't true. Being highly sensitive, it's not a disorder, it's not a mental illness. Although for a long time, a large part of my life, it has felt that way. But the reality is it's just my brain works more actively in different parts than others. And I'm sure there's plenty of parts of my brain that don't work at all, just to balance it out, you know. Well, the reality of being born with high levels of sensory processing sensitivity is my central nervous system, which runs throughout my entire body, that gathers a lot more information. And then that information needs constantly processing in my brain. So while every one of us is unique, there are commonalities, and it's no different for highly sensitive people. We're all unique, but there are common identifiers to look out for. Just flick over to my final slide. That's it. So what you can see on the screen there, it's not a definitive list, but if you strongly identify with most or all of these points, there's a good chance you could be a highly sensitive person. I consider myself personally to be quite high on the sensitivity scale. That doesn't mean all sensitives feel the world as I do. You know, there'll be some that feel it a lot more vividly, and there'll be some far less so. We're all a total sum of our genetics and life experiences, so we're all completely different. My brain is naturally wired to process information deeply. I'm a deep thinker. And by deep thinker, please don't mean that I'm trying to suggest I'm a philosopher. I simply mean I think very deeply on things, often way too deeply. If you ask me to make a snap decision, there's a good chance I'll become paralyzed. The more you try and force an answer out of me, the more my brain will shut down. It's like asking me to make a snap decision makes my brain kick back and go into panic mode because it doesn't have the information to come to a decision. And that doesn't matter whether it's a big choice or not. Seriously, I can feel like I'm going to have a meltdown if you give me two options for dinner and then demand an answer straight away. It's really not a big deal, but my head doesn't take it that way. I'm very emotionally responsive to a lot of things, particularly to music. I cry often. I'm moved by music. It's not ugly crying, which believe me, I'm very good at as well. But I can cry from joy, from understanding, from connecting with things. And this has been, as a male, one of the elements that I've really struggled with throughout my life. One of the things in therapy that I did, I never sort of really picked up on until it was pointed out to me, was when I'd ugly cry, I'd start beating my fist against my head, like I was trying to knock the emotion out of me. I never realised I did that until it was pointed out. And the more frustrated I got that I was crying, the more I cried. I'm incredibly sensitive to tactile sensory input, such as the texture of a fabric. I am and always have been an absolute nightmare for clothes. If something has a hint of scratchiness or it's fitted, I can't wear it. And I don't mean in the sense, you know, I don't like that, I'm not wearing it. It honestly feels like there's an assault on my brain and I can't function. Even just the tiniest itch that a lot of people wouldn't even feel my brain's on fire. I can't focus on anything. It consumes me. It's a bit of a shame, really, because my mum's an amazing knitter, and for 43 years she's been trying to get me in one of her creations, but wool is a absolute no-no for me. I just can't wear it. As a kid, I had to have all the labels removed from clothes. I had to travel far and wide to find school trousers that I could wear without having a meltdown. I'm highly sensitive to sound. Environments with loud noises and crowded spaces are especially overwhelming, and I really need to filter out some of the sound or my head starts wobbling. It is hard to describe. It's a bit like walking into a packed room. It's like there's 100 people in my head shouting, banging cymbals together, and it's all out of unison. And it is really disorientating. So active cancellation headphones have been an absolute revolution for me, and allowing me to dull down some of the background noise. But even in quiet environments, I'll struggle because every sound stands out, and I pick up on conversations and chatter around me, and it becomes very noisy in my head. And I'm someone who already has a very noisy brain to begin with anyway, just to the way I think. So I'll often pick up on quiet conversations, just walking past, often to the amazement of the people talking quietly that I'd heard them. It's not that I'm walking about trying to listen to people. I just pick it up without any thought, and most of the time, if I'm honest, I wish I could block it out. I don't want to hear everyone's conversations. I also have a limitless amount of empathy, which is one of the things that I've really struggled with the most. That probably sounds a bit odd, right? Like, how do you struggle with empathy? Essentially, my empathy extends to absorbing other people's emotions. It's hard to describe again, but I feel other people's emotional pain, their happiness, their sadness, and more. The stronger the emotion, the more it's going to impact me. If you sit with me in tears because you're hurting, I can pretty much guarantee I'm going to sit there in tears with you, because I genuinely will feel your pain. As someone who grew up with very little emotional intelligence, couldn't make sense of my own feelings, experiencing other people's emotions along with my own has been seriously confusing. And there's times where my brain just shuts down, which for me means I emotionally break down. Walking into a room, it can feel like opening the door of an oven. You know, when you open the door and it's like, oof, of heat. Walking into a room feels like that sometimes. It's like I'm staggered by this wave of feeling. But it's not heat. It's just the emotional charge of the room. I have a weird ability to just know when someone is uncomfortable, or an even weirder ability, I guess, to just instinctively know what needs to change to help them. I've even been known to know something's wrong with someone before they do. It's weird. Now, I know what I'm talking about is going to be difficult for some people to understand, because my experience is totally different to yours. How I experience life, it might seem totally alien. That's all right. I struggle to understand how other people experience things because it's the polar opposite of how I do, but it doesn't mean I'm going to dismiss it. What I'd say is, sensitive people, we don't have exclusive access to feelings that others don't. We just experience it more vividly and differently to you. You can think of it, if you want, like two people and they're watching the exact same film. One person's watching it in HD, the other person's watching it in 4K. You're both watching the same film, but one of you is getting a more detailed picture. I experience emotions that others do. It's just the scale with me is far bigger and there's a lot more nuance within it. So my ask of people is that even if you find it hard to relate to the experience of a highly sensitive person, please don't be so quick to dismiss or invalidate how we feel. High sensitivity is well known and it is well documented. There's plenty of research to back it up and many scientific articles you can read discussing it. I hope that what I've described today has resonated with some of you and given a different view of sensitive people other than we're too sensitive. If it's really resonated with you and you're wondering if you are highly sensitive, it's a good chance you are. There's a simple test you can take online that'll guide you, but you know, it's not a black and white answer. And you need to be like completely honest with the answers when you're sort of doing the tests. For me though, I think, or I believe that most highly sensitive people are aware that they feel differently to other people and they experience the world in a different way, even if they don't understand why themselves, as I didn't. If you do have a sensitive side and you look at it like I did as something to fix or hide, I hope that by finding out a bit more about it, you can see yourself in a different light. Discovering the world of sensitive people has helped me to make sense of my life more so than anything. It's set me on a course of accepting and embracing myself rather than seeing myself as broken and needing fixing. And as someone who thinks deeply about everything, I can't tell you what a breath of fresh air that has been for my mental health. Hopefully, by spreading the word, I can help fellow sensitives to see it as a strength, not a weakness. A promise. We're not special members of a snowflake society. We don't have a secret handshake to identify ourselves. Although that would be cool. I might have to invent one. We're just like everyone else, you know. We experience the world more vividly. We're just as varied. We have our own unique fingerprints. And we're a combination of our genetics and our life experiences. For those of you that don't identify as highly sensitive, I hope today has given you some understanding and food for thought. My ask of you is, if you're thinking of telling someone that they're being too sensitive, please just pause for a moment. Ask yourself, are they being too sensitive, or are they reacting as nature intended them to? Instead of trying to invalidate that experience, why not ask them to explain it to you? It may make sense. And to my fellow sensitives, I want to say, embrace your sensitive side and please don't be ashamed of it. You might find that trying to work with yourself rather than fight yourself, it can be a life-changing, and it could just be a superpower. So that's it for what I planned to say today. I guess we'll take it over to a Q&A.
I just want to thank you, Dave. Actually, if I could give you a big virtual round of applause for that talk, I would. But brilliant, really, really good to hear from you. I just want to commend you as well for just being so honest and giving us that account. You know, it was really powerful, actually. So a huge thank you from myself and on behalf of all our colleagues as well. Now I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to look through the chat, Dave, because we've had quite a lot of questions. So have a look through that. And whilst Dave's doing so, I just want to really thank everybody for joining so far today and supporting and taking this talk in from Dave. I mean, I think we had 113 people in the chat, and wow, that makes me really, really proud, actually, of how we're all kind of supporting not only World Mental Health Day, but our own colleague on this one. So whilst you're kind of taking that in, Dave, I'm aware a few people have put questions in, but I'm going to kick things off with with one from myself, and that probably linked to how I best know you through work, you know, and your career in particular. I'm keen to know how, you know, you've kind of managed is probably the wrong word, but how you've kind of gone through your career being a highly sensitive person, particularly in the role we do. You know, you're a fellow comms person, and feedback and probably constructive criticism so important as it is in so many of our roles. You know, everybody on the call, I suppose, and how have you kind of managed? I don't know what would be the best phrase, but how has that kind of affected your career, would you say, if it has?
Definitely affected my career, my way of thinking. Historically, I was terrible at accepting criticism. Unless you presented me with lots of factual information to justify your criticism, then it used to get to me. But because I never had any emotional intelligence, and it's taken me a long time to sort of get there, I used to internalize all that. So yeah, I'd take the criticism, but you'd never see it expressed outwardly. It would always be pushed in. When you bury so many things that deeply, it gets to a point where you can keep pushing it down, but eventually it gets to a point where it just pops. So I think more recently, I've tried to change my way of thinking with criticism, and now when I ask people for feedback, I actually say to them, please, can you be as critical as possible, be as nitpicky as you can, because I've got my perception of how something is, but that's my perception. If you've got a perception that's different to me, I need to tailor what I'm doing to fit your perception, essentially.
Yeah, I like that. And I like how you've ultimately, it has used that phrase, it's become a superpower, but you've worked it to help you, you know, and which I think is really interesting, you know, in relation to your role as well. But well, just before we kick on with the Q&A, everybody, and thank you so much to everybody who's popped a question in the chat for Dave. There's a lot to get through, and hopefully we will have time. The session's until 11:15, but I think we've agreed, haven't we, Dave? If we do run over, we've got until about 11 anyway for anybody who can stay with us. It's been recorded as well if you miss the end of the session, and we'll try and get through as many questions as we can. But if we don't get to yours, feel free to reach out to Dave afterwards. He'd be more than happy to pick up with you.
Please.
Should we start with Anna's question, Dave, which was the first one that came in fairly early in the session? What advice would you give to parents of a highly sensitive child? Thanks, Anna.
My strongest recommendation, I think the thing that would have made the most difference for me, you know, I can't talk generally, but for me, it would have been just people not being so quick to dismiss how I felt. You know, rather than always saying, don't be so sensitive, why are you crying? Why are you doing that? Just say, talk to me, explain to me what you're feeling, how it's making you feel, how that feeling is affecting you. Rather than just quote that I don't feel it, so you don't. Try and work with them. Don't dismiss how they feel. Just work towards understanding it.
Well, thanks, Dave. It's a common theme, actually. I feel that we've probably seen throughout, certainly the talks we've had throughout Embrace Festival, is that allyship of just being open, listening to people, not to be kind of cliche, but to embrace people when they are kind of conforming in you. I think it comes back to that to a degree there. So great. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Dave. Let's move on to Kirsty's question. I take on other people's moods, but also react and get upset when others do. Very much relating to your point, Dave. Usually more than they do. Do you have any tips on how not to get sucked into the black hole that can trigger anxiety and overthinking? Thanks, Kirsty.
That's a
Okay.
tricky one. I mean, yeah.
Good question.
The absorbing people, I think I'm still making progress in a lot of these areas myself personally. But absorbing people's moods, I think the more I've started to understand myself, the more it's allowed me to sort of separate from how I'm feeling and how I've grown confident in how I feel and how I experience things, and walking into a situation where I am absorbing another mood that I wasn't feeling before I might have entered a room. There's a part of just sort of being conscious that that is happening, that you can kind of go, hang on, I am experiencing this. This isn't my own emotion. Let me see what I can do to help that person, but try not to take it all on like it is your own. And I think that's something I've been really guilty of in the past. It's almost like I'll feel for people. I'll feel more hurt for them than they feel for themselves, and that can become quite detrimental to your mental health when you're constantly feeling and experiencing that. So I think learning to separate your own emotions from others and just getting to that point where you can feel a change is really helpful. In terms of the triggering anxiety and overthinking, I still get anxiety. Yeah, you put me in a room full of people and I'm anxious. But I've taken steps to reduce that. Noise cancelling headphones. I've been mucking about with a fidget toy throughout this entire presentation. I hope that didn't like rattle all the way through, by the way. But yeah, just fiddling about with that keeps my hands still and keeps my brain a bit more calm.
Thanks.
I wouldn't say I've taken to meditating, but I have taken to allowing my mind to drift. So I'm a big fan of just sort of atmospheric background music, but with nature sounds overlaid over the top of it. So like a thunderstorm or something. I'll quite happily sit for a couple of hours. I probably do my best thinking by trying not to think.
Yeah.
So the less I try and think of something, the more I think about it.
Get that one. We'll move on to, thanks Dave, we'll move on to Pip's question. If someone is feeling like you are describing, what would you recommend they do to get support? Thanks, Pip.
So there are, believe it or not, lots of accredited counsellors and therapists out there that will specialise in sensory processing, sensitivity, highly sensitive people. There would be a great place to start, but I think for me, the biggest thing was understanding that I'm not alone in this world. I've gone through so many years feeling like I was a broken human being and like, what's wrong with me? Why do I cry all the time? And then I get more angry about crying. So finding that sort of group of people and going, wow, there's millions of people out there that are just like me. I think that was a great place to sort of start with in terms of support. I just sort of understanding that you're not alone. Now there's lots of highly sensitive websites out there. I'd sort of started initially looking into introvertism, which led me into the highly sensitive world. And I can share some links afterwards if that's helpful to people, some websites that I'd really recommend. And I think just by reading about the world of people that experience the world in the same way and understanding that you're not isolated, you're not the only person that does feel this way, but we do have this sort of tendency to internalize it and not talk about it.
Yeah.
So it can be hard finding fellow people, but I think once you start actually talking about it, you'll be quite surprised at how many people go, oh yeah, do you know, I experience things a bit like that as well.
Yeah.
But no one likes to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, I'll link in some websites that are really good for support on that.
That'd be brilliant. Thank you. This is a question that Pip's kind of your answer certainly to Pip's question relates to from David, which is you said you'd attended many hours of therapy but never managed to fix yourself. That's quite a lot of hours, so I'm interested to hear if you did get any benefit from attending therapy. Great question. Thanks, David.
Yeah. Yeah. So I am a huge advocate of therapy. Did I get exactly what I needed in terms of, I mean, I probably went into therapy quite naively, thinking I can fix myself. In reality, it wasn't something to fix. But for me, because I think there's probably a lot of blokes like this, I think making generalizations, but I think a lot of men are incredibly bad at managing their own emotions. They may have grown up like me, you know, in a world where you're not supposed to have emotions as a man, and just internalize it. And I think a lot of people get into later life and they can't manage their emotions. And for a lot of people, it could come out in violence. For me, it just comes out in just uncontrollable tears, which, you know, is really emasculating as a bloke. It's so what therapy did for me, and it took a long time and a lot of hard work, was it taught me to talk about my emotions.
Yeah.
You know, I remember the first hour of therapy I ever went to was just me crying uncontrollably for an hour and nearly hyperventilating and passing out. And it's taken a lot of hours to learn to open up, even when the therapist's like saying, tell me what you're thinking, tell me what you're feeling. I'm like, nothing, I'm fine. I just can't stop crying. Like, look, there's clearly something wrong. I just had this inability to talk about it. So therapy has been hugely beneficial in just unlearning a lifetime of internalizing things and just going, do you know what? It's all right to talk.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. Can't encourage that more, Dave, and echo what you've just said, of course. And there's a question, Dave, I want to get to from Anna, which again, going back to our relationship, you know, we met through working here and everything and working together. And Anna's asked, what have successful managers done to get the best out of you, given your highly sensitive nature? And you've had open conversations with myself about managers you've had in the past and the ones that have really kind of empowered you and you've felt so confident working for. And it's a great question, Anna, but I'm going to let you obviously take the wheel on that one, Dave.
Sorry, if you seem like, it's like my brain's like an old filing cabinet. I'm like, trying to find the answer. It's in there somewhere. So I've been really fortunate. I've had some fantastic managers. I've got a really good manager at the moment, and I'm just saying that because he's my boss at the moment. He's a good guy. He does genuinely care. My manager before that, absolutely incredible. I'll be honest, like a lot of my one-to-ones with her, I can't thank her enough. She was more than a manager. She was a therapist. You know, she really cared. She really wanted to listen. She probably sat and watched me cry for more hours than she'd care to remember. I think just by sort of talking to me, I've had a lot of managers that have also allowed me a lot of sort of creative freedom, which has sort of helped in my role. Like, we all have our own styles, but rather than somebody trying to come along and sort of impose their style over yours, they've just sort of accepted my style and tried to sort of enhance it by adding to it rather than trying to sort of overwrite it with their own version of how things should be done. I don't know if that really answers it or not.
Very much, yeah. And just empowering, going back to that word. I felt like I was prodding you with a stick then, Dave, to share that experience of that particular manager you had. But I remember you telling me, you know, a similar account of that. And I think that's so important. And evidently, was for you, you know, during really important career periods of your career. And so yeah.
I'd say she was, some of our managers are, not to put a damper on things, but a lot of my managers are be a strong reason why I'm still here, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
So I've had lots of dark thoughts, and they've been massive in helping me through that.
Amazing. Great to hear. Thanks, Dave. Great. I mean, there's a question that feels natural to move on to this one actually, from Tamas, which is, how did you get to that point where you stopped fighting yourself and rather accepted it and to just live with it in terms of being a highly sensitive person? And I think that the question I'd just like to add on to the end, Dave, of that would be, when was that realization, and that, you know, that you were a highly sensitive person as well?
I mean, believe it or not, it's probably only in the last 18 months, maybe a bit longer, that I've sort of, it's fairly recent, and it is something that just immediately, as soon as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh my God, it's like someone's written a description of me. So there was a very significant point, I think, in the last 18 months when my brain sort of flipped. I'm also a huge fan of music. I love music that makes me feel. And I think there's a lot of songs that have helped me sort of realise my sensitive side. I'm going to give a shameless plug to an artist called Ren. He's got an absolutely amazing song called Hi Ren. Now, if anyone is into mental health, it is just one of the most inspirational messages in the world. And I think it's sort of seeing other people going, do you know what, this is how I experience the world, and being vulnerable about it and going, it is who I am, you accept it or don't.
Yeah.
I think that
absolutely,
that sort of change in attitude, and more often than, when you see people being vulnerable and putting themselves out there, people don't want them to fail. People are generally supportive.
Absolutely.
And people generally, there's a lot of people going through the same thing, but we just don't talk about it as a society. So I love sort of people like that have really sort of changed my way of thinking.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks, Dave. I'm
I feel
cautious
like I'm
of
being a bit
time.
of a politician in not answering the question.
I know, it's great. I hope I haven't missed any questions. I've been through the chat a couple of times there, and I think we've captured all the questions. If I've missed one, please remind me, pop it in the chat just as we're wrapping up. But a bit of a kind of shameless plug, obviously it is World Mental Health Day, but I've just posted the link to Bloom, of course, our wellbeing program here at M Brown. And hopefully you all know what Bloom is. For those of you who don't, it's very much our wellbeing program. It's bursting with tools, resources, and support, just to empower you to take control of your own well-being, put yourself first. And I just can't encourage you all enough. If you haven't looked for Bloom, or you haven't recently, take a look through that today. And just whilst we're waiting for any last minute questions, just to encourage you again, following the session today, if you do want to reach out to Dave, whether that's to talk about today's talk, any questions you have for him, he's more than happy to speak to you as well. But I just want to say,
please feel free to grab me if I'm walking past and have a chat. I'm always willing to have a talk. I'm in pajamas today, so if you see me about the office today, I might look a bit odd.
Yeah.
Well, we're wearing pajamas in FS for World Mental Health Day, so yeah. I just thought it was pajamas.
I just thought it was a really nice tartan shirt, Dave, but there we go.
Matching bottoms.
But yeah, I mean, such a great session. Probably one of my favourite sessions that I've ever supported on here. It's been a pleasure, Dave, actually. I just want to thank you again from myself, from all our colleagues, everybody who's joined the session today. just for all of it. It was fantastic. Now the session has been recorded, so I just noticed a couple of comments in the chat from people who said they'd like to share it with the family. Please do, by all accounts. It will be on our digital library on Fabric in about an hour's time. Please share it with anybody, friends, family. I'm sure Dave wouldn't mind at all. And yeah, I think, again, huge thanks, Dave. And thanks to everybody who's joined us today.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming along and for the support and the questions. That's been brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks, Dave. Have a great World Mental Health Day.